When I was 18 years old, I was homeless. How many people here have ever been homeless? So I came from what I consider a typical American family. Somebody that came and just didn't get the dream right away, didn't have passed down wealth, didn't have opportunity.
I had a brother that this month, 13 years ago, died in an encampment. So when you're driving by the homeless in the streets of Los Angeles, that's somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's mother, somebody's sister. What is going on in Los Angeles? What on earth is happening here?
There's very few people that actually have the ability to implement more change than the people that are actually sitting in this room.
We've got to figure this out, not how to manage, but how to solve it. And if we can solve it, it's scalable. The rest of the world is looking at us.
The goal of the Urban Land Institute is to provide leadership in the responsible use of land in creating and sustaining thriving communities worldwide.
Our homeless crisis is our housing crisis, and our housing crisis is one of affordability. It's extremely urgent and has been for decades.
I think the land use part of the real estate part, and those are really, I think, synonymous, are kind of the physical manifestation of how we deal with the problem, right? So a land use issue is finding sites and where can we put it? A land use issue is creating innovative designs. A land use and real estate issue is lowering the cost per unit. How do we improve the approval and entitlement process to get those built?
You include a diverse set of perspectives so that you get everyone's opinions and thoughts to coalesce into an idea.
Community leaders, nonprofit developers, for-profit developers, attorneys, architects, landscape architects.
We understand how to create housing solutions that match with a particular demographic need. That's what we do. That's what we do as developers and financiers. So why can't we take that same discipline that we have and apply that to the disparate needs of the homeless community? That's our goal today.
And to understand what we need to do to address homelessness across our city and for the various subgroups that make up the homeless population, we first must know how we got here.
If you go downtown, you'll see those tall buildings, and that's how they were building at the turn of the century. Something happened in the mid-70s where there was something called the slow growth movement. Before the proposition was passed by LA City voters, LA City was zoned to have enough parcels to accommodate 10 million households. Overnight, LA City was downzoned to only have enough parcels to accommodate 4 million households.
The city was mostly developed after the war, and we're a different city now with millions of more people, and we just need to think differently about density and zoning and everything else. But that's, it's a tough hoe to get the single-family homeowners to come on board with changing our city, but the reality is it's not 1950 anymore.
On top of that, in the 1980s, you saw this federal retreat from providing services and housing. So why did you not see families with their children living in cars before the 80s? Because the federal government provided much of that funding directly.
And Black people who have for decades been disproportionately impacted by homelessness, on average, make up 40% of the homeless population across the country. So let that sit in, that's every other person. You also have to think about mass incarceration. We can't ignore that. And if we don't make it feasible for people to come back into housing and have access to housing, you're going to see them on our sidewalks. So there are a lot of things that have happened over the history of this country that are contributing to those things. How many people want to end homelessness? And the people experiencing homelessness do too, so believe that.
It's not that we don't know how to do it. We do know how to do it. The question then will be, do we have the will to do it? The community, whether that's the local community, the state community, the feds, somebody has to pay for that housing. We have a system now that makes that all very mysterious as to who pays for what, and leads to a lot of the cost problems too, because nobody can really focus on costs because everybody's focusing on allocations, everybody's focusing on just getting it done. The system just makes it so hard.
We need to change the system, and if it were up to me, we should blow up the whole allocating system, TCAC, SIDLAC, and start afresh. And I bet you there are lots of people out there in the room that agree with me.
If we keep doing it the same old way, it's going to keep costing $500,000, $700,000 a unit. It's going to keep not building for understanding who the demographics of homelessness are. So how are we beginning to look at really innovative solutions?
One of the things we need to do, I think, is we need to be multimodal. And to some of the earlier speakers' points, actually figure out what works for an individual.
2 years ago, we dedicated 65 interns at Gensler and at CB, and we came up with a database. We've identified 58,000 sites that are owned by the federal government, the state government, the county government, and the city governments. 58,000 sites, excess properties, that we can get for free.
Measure H has helped quite a bit, but that's only for 10 years, right? And so we're constantly thinking ahead, what's gonna happen 8 years from now, and where's the services funding coming from? Can we build it into our financial model so that we're sustainable and to be able to make sure that the tenants actually get the services that they need to stay stable?
And also, how do we integrate within the neighborhood as well? Again, maintain that balance of integrating in the place where the challenge may already exist and the people may already live currently, and also finding other locations where we can scale up.
There's a structure called a sprung structure. It's a huge industrial tent. They're used around the world in all kinds of different settings. And in those, we can house anywhere from 150 to 300, 350 people at a time. And we said Housing First isn't coming for 10 or 20 years, and there's people on the street right now. We had an idea and a plan, but until HEPA hit San Diego, they weren't going to do anything.
This was a situation that with 18 living in an encampment through human feces, put a human virus out there, HEPA, that actually shot through the state of California, hospitalizing over 500 people and killing 22. I look at the reaction right now to the world on Corona, and I look at what happened in San Diego with an outside encampment of 18 people. We cannot confine this issue to Skid Row.
The County Department of Health Services, and again, this is a county of 10.5 million people, so we're bigger than some states. We're not talking about small measures here. Used healthcare dollars to help people get into housing, recognizing that the county was spending inordinate amounts of money to treat and retreat folks exposed to the elements.
And maybe people have different concepts of what that means to do something about it, but the bottom line is that homelessness is so high on people's consciousness right now that it's an opportunity.
Everybody in this room can make a difference. And the fact that you're here today is fabulous because you've taken the first step. You're arming yourself with facts, figures, and the reality.
And I think just looking around the room, the connections people are making, who's talking to who, how do we kind of gather the knowledge and the content that was created today, begin to share that.
So I think when you get people like ULI seeing like, hey, we are the people who have the power, we are the people who have the access. Now how do we actually apply this power we have in a way that yields results? Usually you get results.